Hello and welcome to the first ever CVW-11 interview. Today we'll be interviewing a very special set of guests, Heatblur Simulations, about their highly anticipated F-14 Tomcat. My name is Matt Icefire Schutte, Commander Air Group, Virtual Carrier Air Wing 11. With me today is all of my staff that are involved with the Tomcat here in CVW-11. Most are veterans and or active duty. 3 gentlemen in particular that are on my staff have spent a good chunk of their lives working on our beloved Tomcat for real in the United States Navy. I'm privileged to introduce everyone on my staff, starting with my Deputy Commander Air Group, Homer.
How's everybody doing? I'm Homer. I'm retired 747 pilot. Spent 46 years flying and a lot of years also in airline training and maybe some of the simulators that you were working on.
Yeah, maybe. I've never worked on a 7.4, but yeah.
But I also flew DC-8s and DC-9s. So. But yeah, I've been here about a year and been doing a lot of training here. I have an opportunity to pass on some of this aviation background I have to other people coming in who've never had a chance to experience what really happens out there in the aviation world, and DCS certainly gives us that opportunity to do some of that now. So anyway, that's my background. It's nice to meet you guys.
Likewise, Homer.
Here we have the commanding officer, VF-41 Black Aces, Shadow.
Hey guys, pleasure to meet all 3 of you, and welcome to the Air Wing 11 here. I'm Shadow. My background is I'm retired Air Force. I'd spent about 9 years flying in the back of a E3 Century, the AWACS, and I spent another 9.5 years flying C-130s. What we do here, my only contribution to the wing here is just mission planning, maybe a few tactics, techniques, and procedures that we use in the real world. And happy to be here. I'm glad you guys came. Thanks.
Next we have his XO, VF-41 Black Aces, Spiceman.
Hey guys. Yeah, nice to meet you. I'm an F-14 guy. F-14A is most of my experience. I joined the Navy in 1984, got to my first squadron in 1986. That was VF-41. I was there until 1990, and we were the F-14A then, and then I went to VF-101. And the A+ and the Bs were just sort of coming out, so I got a little bit of experience on the B, and then went back to VF-41 in 1993, from 93 to 95 when I got out. So I'm 99% an F-14A guy, so I'm looking forward to when that comes out. And then after the Navy, I went and got my commercial pilot's license, so I've got that. I never really flew for a living, just one of those really expensive hobbies. And then, well, so now I'm an engineer for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, working on air traffic control, communications development requirements, and design and whatnot. So yeah, so that's what I do. I joined the Air Wing. I'm probably one of the youngest guys as far as membership in the Air Wing goes. I think I joined back in October or so. So. Yeah, that's me. Glad to meet you.
Cool. Glad to meet you, Spiceman, and we enjoyed your videos already with the startups and.
Yeah, I'm kind of the squadron videographer. I've really gotten into that and enjoy it. And I'm hoping to make some nice videos in the future when the Tomcat comes out too. Yep, thanks.
Looking forward to it.
And now we have the CEO of VF-213 Black Lions, Sonar.
Hi, so my background is basically, I'm in the Navy right now as a sonar tech, hence the call sign. I have some private pilot experience. I trained for a little bit. I really enjoyed aviation as a kid. My dad flew, but when I ended up joining the Navy, I went submarine, so it's kind of, I guess I'm flying submarines, but that's about as close as I get to any real-world experience. In the Air Wing, though, we run 213, so we do an air-to-air focus. and I'm really excited to get my hands on the Tomcat and see what we can do with it. So I appreciate all the work you guys are putting into it, and can't wait.
And the XO of VF213 Black Lions, Hawkeye.
How you guys doing? Nice to meet you guys. Glad you guys are here. I'm Hawkeye. I said I was in the Navy from '98 to '06. I worked on I was in VF213. I was an aviation electrician's mate, which pretty much I worked on flight control systems, wing sweep generators, electrical systems, backup navigation systems, SAHARs and stuff like that. I did two combat cruises with 213. I did Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. I got out of the Navy in '06, and I'm an IT tech now. I've been in the Air Wing for about a year now. My flight sim experience was pretty limited till I got here. I went through a hell of a training program with Homer. He taught me a lot about flying, and glad to be here. That's my background. Nice to meet you guys. Glad you guys are here.
Nice to meet you again, Hawkeye.
Also joining us is the XO of VFA 97 Warhawks, Shotgun.
Good evening, gentlemen. Pleasure to meet everybody. As you said, I'm Shotgun, and I spent 20 years in the Navy. About 10 of that was on the F-14. My first squadron was VF-24 in 1993, right at the stage of the Navy making the decision to commit the Tomcat into the big bombing role. So I was kind of in the mix of all of that. So VF-24, after that, went to VF-211 for another 4 years. Did some tours, other tours, ordnance tours, such as weapons assembly and stuff like that. So I have a background in how things go together and how they are loaded, of course. And then one of my last tours, which was probably the most interesting one, was I was in VX-30 R&D, doing R&D work with the F-14, QF-4s, and F-18. So that's kind of my background, and it's a pleasure to meet everyone, and more than happy and looking forward to contributing to this whole thing.
And last but not least, the CO of VFA 122 Flying Eagles, Bullhead.
Hey guys, so like I said, I'm the guy, or I run VFA 122. Our primary role in the wing is to really mainly teach people how to, right now, to employ the Hornet in a combat role. Homer's been doing a great job over on the DCAT side, which is kind of our introduction to flying. But my job is I take those guys who finish up with Homer or the rest of the instructors, and then I teach them how to turn the Hornet and hopefully soon the Tomcat to a weapon. So as far as my real world experience, I've been flying for about 5 years now. I'm probably the youngest guy in age currently. I'm second youngest right now in the Air Wing. I'm 19 right now. But I've got about 350 hours of flight experience and currently a CVW instrument flight instructor. So biggest thing I've really gotten out of the Air Wing, I'd say, just, I've learned a lot how to fly real world, and it's really went from Homer and the rest of these guys just learning how to be a better pilot, and I've seen my flying skills improve. So that's pretty much all I got.
Good to meet you, Bullet.
All right, now we have our guests of honor, Heatblur Simulations. Would you like to introduce yourselves, gentlemen?
So my name is Andrew. I started working with Heatblur a while back, but wasn't really working on the Tomcat per se until about like a year and a half ago. And I worked in the commercial flight simulation industry, so I sent a message to Cobra and told him what my background was, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I think we could find a spot for you." So then eventually I started working on the flight model and the engines, and a couple aircraft systems as well.
Cool.
And I've been doing that for about a year and a half. But before that, I worked in the commercial flight simulation industry, and now I'm in the private space industry.
My name is Johan, and I'm responsible for the manual for F-14 and also like technical research and trying to figure out what some of the systems do. And my background is as a weapons engineering officer in the Swedish Navy, and at least in part that enables me to somewhat more easily understand some of the systems in the Tomcat. As I usually work with radars and all the kind of systems in the aircraft, but on ships instead. I guess I'm also one of our guys who's more like acquainted with the back seat and being able to play as a Rio. So, and I'm really looking forward to letting all you people try out the back seat as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
All right, thanks a lot. That's a lot of introductions. Okay, well, now that we got to know each other, it really seems we do have an impressive group from Heatblur and lots of real-world experience from our guys and me, who has none. So that's great. So we'll sit here and we'll get cracking. So I'd like to open it up to we'll give the first question to Shadow.
All right, you're gonna jump right into questions. Make sure I got the names right. Got IronMike, got Andrew and Johan. Is that
Yep.
Yeah.
awesome? Hey, listen, guys. One of the things that I did when I first got to the wing, almost 11 months ago, no, about 8 months ago, is Cobra put out the first initial Tomcat post in the forums about, hey, it's almost ready, and so I started something in the wing called Tomcat Fever. So whenever we're really feeling it, or whenever something is released, I get the band going. I guess you can call me a glorified cheerleader, but we have something here in the wing called Tomcat Fever, and today is Tomcat Fever Day 230, I believe. Did I get that right?
Yep, that sounds right.
All right, the Tomcat Fever. I don't have a whole lot of questions. I do have
When's the Tomcat coming out?
Yeah, that's not on our list.
That's
but
not on our list.
On our list.
It's not on the list.
There's an
But I know you
answer
guys-
for that, though.
Yeah, sure.
March
I know.
21st.
Don't worry, man. That's not what we're here for.
That's not what we. You know,
The answer is 2 weeks, guys.
You know what? I've seen in some other discords they have 2 weeks and it's got the little trademark symbol, registered trademark symbol above it, which I really like.
Yeah, it's the community signature.
That's right.
Tomcat Fever Day 230. Because it's been a long time. I know you guys have been busy. My first question is a pretty simple one, which is, when was the last time you guys got
When we got what?
any sleep, rest, time off?
Most of the software guys, except for maybe one or two, also work full-time jobs. So
Yeah, it's got to be.
I don't know. I don't have as many areas of responsibility as somebody like Switherd or Gyrovag do, but I mean, I don't lose sleep over working on this thing. I'll put it that way.
That's
Anyone who's been around the software world for a living, like I've been around the software world for many years, can understand, exactly how it goes. It's always a crunch at the end. You can give yourselves, 5 years to do a 2-year job. It will be in a crunch at the end. It's just the way that software works.
Yeah, the last 5 or 10% takes like 40% of the time.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's about the same for me. My responsibility is mainly the manual and the tutorials. My workload doesn't really compare to the software guys or of the art guys, but I do know for a fact that Cobb puts in a lot of hours.
Yeah. So on that, I'm sorry, Shadow. Don't mean to jump
Go
on your question, but tell us a little bit about the Heatblur's makeup. How many of you are there? I'm guessing you're a pretty distributed group, but for those that aren't familiar with the company Heatblur, can you describe it a little bit?
Well, I think one of the great things about Heatblur is the team. It's very diverse when it comes to the guys and from the backgrounds, although all have, of course, those core prerequisites in common that are needed for this kind of job. But you have Cobra, who's the CEO and founder of Heatblur. He's the lead artist for the F14. Then you have Daniel Swither. He's the lead engineer and also co-founder, and he's mainly responsible for engineering stuff, FM. He's the mastermind behind the Jester AI and the code behind that. Then you have Bert Gyrovag, who is responsible for most of the weapons and radar stuff. Ak O'Donnell and Johan, already now, of course. Then you have Grover, who's doing RWR, navigation, INS, lantern, stuff like that. and
think radios too.
Say again.
I think radios as well.
Yes, of course, Takan, all that stuff. Brilliant job on that. I mean, all of them are doing brilliant jobs, I have to say. I mean, it's a real honor to work with these guys, and to think, that most of them, because I work full time for Heatblur, and it's crunchy at times, but those guys kind of work full time jobs, and then they manage to work full time for Heatblur as well. And sometimes I wonder how the hell they do it.
Yeah.
It's really astonishing. I mean, the sacrifices that have been made for this project, and also the work that has gone into that. And then there is a team of artists as well behind Cobra who help them with that. Plus, we have a bunch of SMEs who are absolutely amazing in the feedback. We have one other very important person, Nick Pernia, who is basically a living encyclopedia of the F-14, and who is also in charge of the SMEs in large parts, and gives extremely detailed feedback on a lot of things, and FM in large parts as well. So then you have a bunch of testers who are helping. We probably have around 10 to 15 testers, I would say, at the moment. We're trying to keep the numbers small because management of the testers and support for the testers takes a lot of time, and in that sense then takes away time from the development. But then we have Grayson Froberg, who's voicing the Jester AI, people who are helping with the missions and so on. So Tom, who did the Phoenix. I mean, there's a whole group of people behind this project, and I don't think it would be possible otherwise.
Yeah.
If it wouldn't be such a tremendous team effort.
Well, and the fact that it's not all of your just full-time jobs just shows it's a work of passion, right? For you guys, which is awesome.
Of course, I think if any of these guys wouldn't be an enthusiast, it wouldn't be possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for that
Good
insight
stuff, man.
into thanks for the insight into the innards of Heatblur. That's really interesting. I like Hawkeye. Go ahead with your first question.
All right. Well, my first question: what made you guys go with the earlier B model Tomcat than the newer Bravo upgrades or the Delta?
Like I think I can answer that one. It's mainly like the information we have. It's mainly that the factor that decides that, and currently we do not have that much info on the PTID and the programmed tactical input display. So, and it kind of limits us at the moment. And we would eventually like to do a PTID and all that stuff, but we kind of need to find more info first.
Okay, very cool.
Feel free to share, guys, if you have any.
We might have a tactical guide somewhere.
Yeah,
Well,
it's still in the hands of the U.S. government right now. I'm trying to get a hold of it, but they keep telling me no. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Good.
No, it's no problem. The main thing is we do know some stuff about it. We're kind of like missing basic stuff like what all the different menus does and stuff. And until we can implement that, we really don't want to like guess on it, as we do have info on the normal TID. So then we rather stick to that.
Yeah, I remember that. We had a blue NATOPS in the shop, and that's the one that everybody can find online and whatnot. But then we also had a yellow NATOPS that in the shop we had to keep in a safe, and that had all of the tactical stuff, the AUG9, the ACLS, not the ACLS, but the data link. That was all sort of documented in that yellow NATOPS, and that's the one that's really hard to find now. I'm pretty sure it's declassified, because there was one that came up on eBay a while ago that had declassified kind of stamped on it, but you just can't find that one. And that's the one that's got a lot of the
Is that the one that's
radar
Swither
stuff
bought?
on it.
Mike, you know.
What was the question?
Swither got a manual on eBay that.
Did he get that one off of eBay?
I don't know. He got something that was supposedly very hard to find, but I don't.
Yeah,
know.
that was
it.
I think that was something minor. That wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
we
have a
do
photographic
have
menu.
a lot of older stuff, and That's also the reason if we kind of stuck to the older versions, as it's a little bit easier to get a hold of information about the early A and early B, and then we kind of construct it forwards as we find out our stuff. Because as our picture of an earlier Tomcat is more complete, we can then kind of like upgrade it and go forwards with like the tidbits of information that we find.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's
And,
funny how that's hard to find now because of the Iranians. But I could guarantee you, knowing the logistics machine it took to keep the Tomcat running, if Iran had 100 Tomcats, well, right now they've got 99 Hangar Queens to keep the one of them still flying. You know what I mean? But yeah,
I know when we wrote our manual we wrote our own manual for the Tomcat, just for our guys to be, just they have an idea of what's going to expect when they get the Tomcat. Me and Spice, we're kind of making our own whatever. But I know when I was researching it, it was hard for me to find anything on AFCS. Like I said, I was there for the transition when we went from AFCS to DFCS, so it was a lot harder for me to find manuals on pre 2002 with the AFCS system in there. I don't know how. I'm glad you guys found it, obviously, but.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the flight control stuff was in some kind of NASA report that Swither had.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And another thing, Ted, is that a lot of the info we have are like dispersed over a large amount of like additions to the NATOPS and like mechanical and engineering like maintenance stuff, which we have used to like piece together everything. So we have kind of very wide and large library of 14 Tomcat documentation, and as to the exact documents we have, we really want to keep it a little bit to ourselves, as it's one of the resources that makes our Tomcat what it is.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys put out. I know we all are.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. And then we got Shotgun up next.
All right, thank you. Obviously, I'm the ordnance guy of the wing, and of course, with the ordnance experience with the Tomcat and Hornet. But one of my questions is, if you look at all the different options of countermeasures for the Tomcat, it honestly wasn't until just a few hours ago I realized how much countermeasure options you really do have with the Tomcat. You're talking a total of almost 500 chaff rounds if you utilized every system available all at one time. So my question is, do you plan on implementing the expanded chaff adapter or the LAU 138s maybe off the bat, or maybe is that maybe a later on something we would get?
I can answer this one as well. It's we actually do have the LAU 138 working already, and it's in, and that's a kind of funny like point for us, because a lot of our team is Swedish, and the LAU 138 is actually designed in Sweden by Celsius Tech.
Right.
Cool. And as for the ECA, the expanded chaff adapter, as it replaces one of the Phoenix rails, and it seemed to be, at least to us, like more oriented towards the TARPS role. We're kind of waiting to use and to implement that until when we do the TARPS eventually.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, it was my experience that it was the ECA was typically used primarily during TARPS missions. But yeah, that's good to hear, and especially the LAU 138s. One issue we always had from a real life component is, you only had 2 buckets up to that, and typically it was 30 chaff and 30 flare, and that was simply it. So the LAU 138s were definitely a welcome to the real world fleet back in those days. But thanks for your answer.
Yeah, and I can actually add a little bit to it. It's that the LAU 138, the chaff packets are a little bit smaller, so we're kind of like designed it so as to be represented in DCS. We eject multiples of them and then divide and generate the chaff packet from like the amount of chaff in each packet. So one ejection from a LAU 138 doesn't equal a chaff ejection from a normal cartridge, but as the LAU 138 ejects multiples anyway, it will be equivalent. And like you say, if you add on the LAU 138, you get a lot of chaff and can then carry more flares internally. So it's a great option.
Wow.
Well, I'm impressed. It sounds like we're actually in the maintenance shop talking.
Right.
All right. Well, next up we got Spiceman.
Hey, I had some questions around, the INS. The INS, at least from my experience on the F-14A, was just such an integral part of getting the plane off the deck, right? We spent a lot of time in the avionics shop lugging around, SINS cables, and hopefully they were broadcasting the data link, and you could get RF SINS alignments, and having to take a handset was like the worst thing in the world for air crews. Dealing with carrier alignments, getting the alerts set up and all that sort of stuff. The INS was integral, and then getting off the deck in time and whatnot. And then it had its errors, and you often had to update it in the air and whatnot. And so I think I saw one of your posts on the ED forums that you were actually modeling some of the inherent errors that come with INS. Can you talk a little bit about the INS and how accurately you've modeled those aspects of it?
Grover modeled the INS, and I think he's modeled it extremely realistically and accurately. Drift is modeled just by the way, so after 20 minutes you get your first peak of drift, and then after 40 minutes I think you get your second peak of drift, which is clearly visible. For example, if you have both radar sensor targets on your TID and you have data link targets, if your INS has drifted, then those targets will not be overlapping, because the DCS AWACS will just go by the coordinates and probably doesn't have any kind of INS drift model. But due to the INS drift in the F-14, you will see this slight displacement. Then other failures are modeled. For example, if you over-G the aircraft, you can break the IMU. If you launch off the deck, it's very rarely, but you could use your INS during that, and numerous other situations. So you also have all the different align, coarse, fine, and so on modeled, so that you can choose basically how fine you want to align the INS, and depending on how fine you align it, then also the accuracy of the INS during the flight will reflect from that. And Johan probably can tell even more about it if you want to chime in there, Johan.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I can kind of recommend you to look up the forum post about it if you haven't already, because Cobra wrote quite extensive detailing of the system. But suffice it to say, Grover has done a very good job detailing in it. And as you might have seen in the YouTube content, it is possible to break the INS by excessive G-loads, and we feel that we have modeled the alignment procedure quite extensively as well. So on the deck, it's not unusual for the INS alignment to take 8 to 9 minutes if you want to align it fully. And the normal procedure is to use the data link, as we haven't really decided on a good way to represent the SINS cable, as we can't just assume that it's connected as while you have electrical connection as you really don't want to align the gyro, as far as I've seen, when you have external electrical supply connected, as when you disconnect it, it might actually interrupt it. But that's what we found as anyway.
Yeah, you don't want to have it going during startup. You want to wait till the pilot's done the emergency generator checks before you start any of that stuff. Yeah.
And go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I can just add quickly that in DCS it doesn't really matter if you have a SINS or a data link, as the data link, because of the DCS limitations, is kind of always on anyway. So it would be only if you specifically wanted to do an MCON mission where you couldn't use a data link, but otherwise it doesn't really matter if it's the SINS or the data link.
But you've modeled the automatic stored heading alignment. If I do a final line and then the boat doesn't move, if I do it again, I get that automatic stored heading alignment?
Yes, and
cool.
we've also, if I remember correctly, we've had an option in the mission editor to have it have that done when you spawn in.
That's really cool.
And I guess I'm assuming you also modeled the in-flight alignment too, try to get your alignment back.
Well, that's if you have additional information, that would be great. But from what we found, like the INS what we model, like the early mechanical one, according to what we found, it isn't actually possible to do an in-flight alignment, at least not to a level where you can actually use it for weapons.
Yeah, you can update it, but if once you've lost it, there's really not much way to get it back. You pretty much are stuck with AHAR's air mass in that case. Or if it's good as just a gyro, you can go to INS air mass. But if you've lost the whole thing, then you're stuck with AHAR's.
I worked at Delta, so we had GPS, so it was we had a little difference.
Yeah, I'd imagine once the B came out, a lot of that was sort of water under the bridge with the integrated GPS and all that kind of keeping it.
Yeah, as far as I found, when the aircrafts got the CDNU and the GPS and the ring laser gyro, that was an ability actually added, so you could do an in-flight alignment. And from my experience, a ring laser gyro is also a much more reliable system.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Can I quick follow up on that?
Have at it.
If you align at an airfield, do you have to pick off your initial point off the chart, or is it going to be supplied automatically like the Hornet waypoint 0?
It's you can set the home base is set in the mission, and you can use that as for like the aircraft position. It automatically does if you start the alignment, but you can refine it via own aircraft position as well, by the cap and the TID back seat. So. And on the carrier, you always have carrier position via the data link. So in the carrier, that's not a problem. But
right.
in essence, yes, but it's normally supplied by the mission editor.
Okay.
The Hornet is the Hornet. I'm saying the Tomcat is a bit different to other aircraft in DCS, who will basically display this infinite flight plan that you can map through the mission editor. While the Tomcat only has 6 waypoints. It has waypoint 1, 2, and 3. Then it has home base, which is if you set a landing waypoint in the mission editor, automatically the landing waypoint. Note that, of course, on a carrier that's moving, this is not being updated because it's basically just the name for a set of coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a fixed point, which you can use as well, fixed point for whatever you'd like. Again, it's just the waypoint.
Bullseye or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Then you have 2 special waypoints, which is surface target, which serves with some special options for air-to-ground capabilities, like you can use it for your computer target, which is your CCRP setting, for bomb runs or stuff like that. And then you have initial point, which is kind of like an offset surface target. That Johan can explain that probably much better than me. But those are the waypoints you get with the Tomcat. However, if anybody would choose to put more waypoints down in the mission editor, then those will be listed in the knee board, and you could then give Jester the coordinates so that he updates, or if you have a human Rio, a live Rio, that he then picks any of the existing waypoints, and during the flight he can update them. Another cool option I think that we added in that regard is that you can put down a marker on the map and give it a name, and then when you go into the Jester menu, those markers will be listed, the first 10 with their names, and he will be able to update any waypoint on that marker from the map.
That's very cool. Nice.
Yeah, we saw that video.
All right, next up we got sonar.
Hi guys. So the thing I wanted to know about was the Forrestal and how it's going to work with people who don't buy the F-14, and then what major differences we should be looking for between the Stennis and the Forrestal as far as layout or size or landing areas or parking or anything like that.
Johan, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. And as far as the discussion has been, is that the Forrestal will be usable for those not owning the F-14s. So in effect, it will be a free carrier for everyone to use. Don't quote me on it because it's still Cobra's decision, but I think that was the decision we reached. And as in regards to the size of the carrier and stuff, I guess a lot of you guys knows it's a smaller carrier, and it's a little bit more of a challenge to taxi around it, but it's not too much. And what I do think though is that it will not be ready at initial early access, but it will be added during early access.
cool thing is it has 5 wires instead of 4. But 2 are really basically the 3 and 4 are very close to.
So I have a follow-up on that. Is the multiplayer parking any different? This is an issue we tend to run into a lot.
Yeah, we have that issue as well, and it's that thing is the parking on the deck is much more of an ED thing. So we're looking forward to how ED will solve that on the standards, because those same solutions will automatically carry over to our carrier, at least as far as I know.
Oh, awesome. All right.
We did have deck elevators working though at one point, so you see the AI taxi on the elevator, and then the elevator goes down and the AI taxis into that.
Cool.
That's gotta look pretty sweet.
Yeah, and that's also one of those features that's a bit dependent on how ED chooses to implement it, but we can implement it on our carriers as soon as they like.
Will there be any features on the forestall that aren't on the Nimitz now?
Feature-wise, it will be the same. Actually, you will have data link, you have ICLS, you have TACAN, and the radios. How ED then will do their Nimitz class, and whether we will be able to implement similar stuff like Airbus balcony, how you call it? You know, the platform and the LSO platform and whatnot. You know, those positions, if those will be available at some point, we don't know yet.
Vulture's Row. I think that's what you were thinking of with the balcony. They call that Vulture's Row up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, if you think about it as like a Stennis with a different skin, it's more or less correct, but it's a more setting correct carrier for the Tomcat, especially for some of the campaign.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that.
And of course, there will be eventually, at least that was the plan, 4 of them, so that you will have the Forester, you will have the Saratoga, the Independence, and the Rain. But the Forester will be the first one.
Wow.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Homer, you got anything?
Just one question about has apparently have you've been working on this project what, about 5 years? During that process, has the advancement of technology changed the way you've approached this? Have you changed your programming, or there been any advancements you've used in the process of making this sim?
Well, I think the biggest changes are that affects the art stuff. So I think it's Cobra and the art guys that have had to change their methods the most. And in regards to programming, as far as I know, we kind of like to do our own stuff, so we're not as dependent on stuff getting released by ED as some other third parties are. But we have to adapt, of course. But I would say the art part would be the one that has to adapt the most.
I got you.
But I think a nice aspect, and Andrew might be able also to tell more on that, is that, you know, I don't understand a lot about coding, but what I see is, you know, that some things are basically getting specifically invented for the Tomcat. For example, like the Jester AI, the specific coding for the multi-crew, which is some sort of layered coding, if I understood that correctly, so that basically everything is coded with multi-crew in mind from the get-go, and stuff like that, you know. And I think that is also something that will make the Tomcat in some way special.
Yeah, we're really
I would say
excited
that
for
there
multi-crew.
haven't really been many technology changes on the code side that have affected how we approached it or anything like that.
Sweet.
Looking forward to it.
All right, Bullhead has the next question.
Hey, so my question's a little less to do with the F-14, actually to do with the side-by-side video you guys put out a while back teasing the A-6 AI. So I first saw that. I never even saw the title. I just saw side-by-side. I was like, ooh, what's this? And I saw, oh my god, they're making an A-6, like they're going to fly. And then I saw the AI, and it kind of raised a couple questions for me. That's kind of what I'm asking about. So, what was the purpose really of including the A-6 AI with the F-14, and if any, what's in the works for it in the future?
It's just basically to create content that goes along with the F-14, because we think that in a flight sim environment, there also needs to be an environment to the flight sim in that sense. If you know what I mean, is stuff that basically increases the immersion, that increases the available assets that are for disposal for mission stuff, that can fit into certain historic scenarios as well, and that just kind of naturally go along with the aircraft and the era of that aircraft. Likewise, as we're doing the Draken for the Vegan, in order to increase the Vegan universe and give more stuff to play with the Vegan. In that sense, we're adding the A6 at some point to the F-14, so that the whole carrier environment and the aspect of the missions that have been flown and the guys you would have escorted and so on will give you a very rich content environment for your F-14 experience, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would be strange to be sitting on the deck of the Forrestal in an F-14A and there would be no A6s there.
Right?
Yeah, exactly right.
So before you guys came here today, I kind of collected a bunch of questions from the Air Wing itself. Since, you know, we have quite a few people, so they're all excited about the Tomcat. I'll just choose one right fast if you guys don't mind. So this one comes from Vapor. What was the who's also another Tomcat guy, by the way. He was same as Hawkeye. What was the process, if any, for getting the permission from Grumman to develop the Tomcat?
There were some talks, but then those talks kind of ended, and luckily they don't own copyrights in that sense on the aircraft. So
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We don't really have a permission from Grumman to do it, but we don't need it either, so luckily.
That's
I'm not really sure how copyright stuff like that works, because I think it might be a situation where if the U.S. government paid for it, they can't. They don't own a copyright to the name F-14 or anything like that.
Ah, okay.
Makes sense.
Gotcha.
Because I mean, it's all technically publicly funded by the government, the development of it.
That's right.
But can I follow up on that? I am curious about just the fact that we're developing the F-14. It's one of the most iconic aircraft that we're going to have in DCS, and it's one of the most popular ones around the world, obviously. But how hard is it? What distinguishes it from every other airplane that we have right now is, one, it's no longer flying, and two, it's one of those aircraft where it's very hard, and we already discussed this, to find data points to kind of incorporate into a sim. So can you talk about the difficulty of finding things, test data points, reach R&D data points, just performance things? Some of these things are kind of readily available, but some things are not, and that includes things, even just the texture stuff. You know, what do you guys, how difficult it is to get into an aircraft, whether it be a static display or something else? How hard is that? Can you explain the difficulty of just putting it all together for an aircraft that's no longer flying, and that includes things like sound, like how did you get the sound? And then obviously the Tomcat is unique, and that, you know, that's kind of like an embargo on a lot of that kind of information, certain information anyway.
I think Cobra was the main guy that was getting into all these museums that had static displays, and he was 3D scanning them and all that stuff, like recording all the switch sounds, taking tons of pictures. He came over here to the United States like about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and went on a tour to all these different places and scanned a bunch of aircraft and a lot of F-14s, and that's how he got all the textures and how he got the 3D geometry and all that stuff.
And I just got to say, as a former F-14 guy, about those textures, it really puts you back in the airplane for guys that, I mean, I feel like one of those 90-year-olds going to an air show and getting to sit in a Spitfire again after all that time. That's the effect that kind of realism on those textures gives you. I mean, stuff like, oh yeah, that wire used to break all the time, and here, look, they had to splice it here too, and yeah, those screws are always stripped out. Look, the screws are stripped out. I mean, it just really just brings you back for the guys that ever kind of worked on the Tomcat. It really is awesome.
Yeah, they did a hell of a job. I mean, like I said, looking at the faded yellow circuit breakers to the screws that aren't, some of the new black screws are at, or the new silver ones that they changed out, and just stuff like that. It just reminds me of being in the Tomcat cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
It's an awesome job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cobra may back off on some of the weathering on some of the panels because apparently they're more beat up looking than they should have been.
That's the downside of static models a little bit, right? And also, there were some antennas that always broke off. There was the ACLS antenna on the chin pod.
That's the blade-like antenna, right?
Yeah, the backstabber we called it, because it would always get you in the back when you ducked
Every
under
time.
that chin pod. And then the ALR50 antenna on top we called the football antenna, because guys would always kick it off when they went to step over the turtle back there. So, yeah, so I guess you find that some of that kind of
won't
stuff.
come off at Mach 2.3.
Right. If you see a picture of a guy in a brown shirt up there changing the antenna, it's because we'd make them change it every time they kicked it off.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
All right, Shotgun, you got the next question, buddy.
Alrighty, I have, of course, another ordnance question. With it being, as we fly in the simulator world, for example, we do different exercises and competitions, air-to-air gunnery and stuff like that. And I've been telling some of the guys here in the wing that you just don't get to squeeze the trigger, and you got this laser beam of 20 millimeters shooting out in front of you. The Tomcat specifically had the early model A's had a 50 round burst limit. Is something like that gonna be implemented into the actual module?
I don't have it in my head if we have it in or not, but if the actual model we're doing had it, we're gonna have it in. I just can't really recall if it's in at the moment because that's Gyroveg's domain. He's the guy who programs the weapons.
I
Okay.
remember that I was speaking with Gyroveg about that once, and that he said because we were discussing in the B, you could set the burst on the ground. And likewise, for example, we don't do laser code changing in the air. We do it like it was, or it is in real life, that you change the laser code on the ground on the bomb.
Correct.
So how we do that is, again, with a knee board. You have a specific page where you can set your KY28 encryptor. You can set the encryption code, which, by the way, also works with simple radio. That's integrated into the F14. Then you can set your bomb codes, your laser codes, and you can set your gun burst. And when I talked with him about the gun rate, because in the B, I think you can set, if I remember correctly, 50, 100, 200 in manual.
Correct.
And I told him I prefer manual because I can squeeze long. And then he said, like, yeah, but you're gonna overheat your gun.
Correct.
And I don't know if it's already in there, but if I remember correctly, at least it sounded as if it is gonna be in there.
That's good to hear. Also, maybe if it hasn't been considered with these settings, your M904 bomb fuse has a physical setting that the ordnanceman would change as well. So that might be something to look into if it's not already looked into.
It might even be in, but I'm not sure. I'd have to check. Do you know?
I have no clue about this stuff, so I can't comment.
Okay, sorry about that.
What were you saying, IronMike? I sound out there for a second.
The fuse setting, the physical one, is that in the knee board already, or is that gonna be in? Do you know?
For which weapon? Sorry, I was sound out.
Bombs. No worries.
Yeah, on your general purpose bomb, like using a M904 nose fuse. The electric fuse there, you can set it in the cockpit all day in flight, but the M904 mechanical fuse which is already kind of implemented in DCS already. That is a physical on the ground setting.
It's not something we have in at the moment. We mostly looked at like the cluster bombs and setting those, but we will for sure implement it if we when we get to it. So not at the moment, but we will do it. Would be my answer.
Okay, well, thank you.
Andrew, this is how I feel every day surrounded by these Tomcat guys. I want no more. And then they saturate me with that stuff I don't understand.
I'm really good for questions about how it flies and the engines.
Okay. All right. Well, we got plenty of those questions too. So, Hawkeye, you're up next.
All right, my question is, are backup systems going to be such as like the emergency generator, die, blowdown gear? Are they going to be modeled in early access, or are they going to be something that you guys are going to do later on, or what's the plan?
Andrew, I was there in the flight model with AFCS or some.
I don't know about the blowdown gear. What were the other backup systems you were talking about?
The emergency generator, like, so you know, if you lose both engines, you can windmill the engines and get the emergency generator on because it's operated hydraulically, or you could use the
I mean, the engines do windmill. I'm not sure. Is the automatic or is the emergency generator automatic with like a certain RPM or something?
Yeah, it won't. Yeah, you have to have it has to have a certain PSI to actually work. So you have to have, like, I think it's 2,000 PSI for the emergency generator to work. But you have to actually flip the switch, the emergency generator switch on for it to work.
I think Daniel or Swither worked on the electrical system, so I'd have to have him here to verify that. But I would assume that he probably did it.
Yeah, the like all the different hydraulic systems, like the transfer pump and the emergency hydraulic flight systems, stuff like that is in, and the electrical system as well is also in. I'm not personally sure about how much you would. How much of a cockpit would light up, so to speak, when from the emergency generator, and when windmilling, the engines aren't going to turn as fast as when they're running either. So
right, yeah, you only get certain buses. You only get I think the AC main and the DC main, I think, or I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, you only get certain buses when the emergency generator is running, so you won't get the full system, obviously, but it should get you enough to start your engines back up if you.
Yeah, and to my knowledge that is in or will be shortly. Like the in-cockpit, like the essential flight instruments do work as long as you're windmilling already. So
that must mean it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess you said you had to flip it on, right?
You have to flip it on, yeah.
Yeah, and the controls are in and functioning for both hydraulics and electrical systems.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. I know we had a couple of flight questions in there somewhere, so Akko's not sitting here just twiddling his thumbs. Sonar, you had one?
That's okay.
If you don't mind, I can also quickly add to the last question that if you guys have any insight into these systems, when you eventually get your hands on it, like if it doesn't exactly work as it should, or like small quirks and stuff of the system, feel free to throw them our way, and we'll look into like implementing it, making it even more.
Yeah, I said something to IronMike about the wing sweep system in particular. I know because I saw I can't remember whose video it was, but I saw some of the errors and how the wing sweep system was working on the deck, anyways. And like, you know, if you come out of oversweep and if you move the handle in emergency all the way up to 20, that the wing sweep server is going to sit back at 68 until you actually drive it forward, and then you hit the master reset button, and it'll cycle that light out and that stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's all. That's actually already fixed, so that's working as you described already.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, I saw it. I was like, because we all noticed that it wasn't driving obviously in auto because you didn't hit master reset. But if you actually have to drive the servo up to 20 when you move it all the way in emergency handle.
Yeah, it was like that because we hadn't fully understood how the servo and the spider detent worked. But in part from your description and us rereading the stuff, we redid it, so it works the correct way now.
Cool deal. Very, very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Sonar had a flight question.
Yeah, so I mean, we hear a lot about the complexity and the difficulty flying the Tomcat. You know, between the way the engines are set up and the way the flight controls are set up, and it's certainly one of the things that a lot of us are looking forward to learning. And since you guys have already obviously got some time in it and have you built it, is there anything tips or any major things that we should understand going into this as to how this is going to be fundamentally different, or the quirks or something that we could look out for?
IronMike spent a lot of time flying this thing. I haven't. I'm basically like a DCS noob. I don't really spend that much time playing or flying because I'm always just working on it. But I would say one thing that's kind of unique is the DLC when you're on approach. I don't know if IronMike you want to add to that. It's pretty cool to use it. Basically, when you're coming on your when you're getting into the groove, basically, if you come in on speed, it has a tendency to float when you level out. And the DLC kind of helps you maintain your glide slope.
Yeah, direct lift control is a system I worked on quite often. So
it's amazing in comparison to the Hornet. I think it's even easier to land because you have the ability to hold your AOA and your speed, your pitch, stick, throttle setting without changing it. You can basically climb or descend by using the DLC, and that, of course. And also, for example, if you are, say, overcompensating in your throttle inputs a little bit, and you see your E bracket falling a little bit because you're kind of, slipping a little bit below speed, you can catch that with the DLC, as well as if you're, for example, overspeeding just a little bit. By using the DLC, you can thus also mitigate the effect the throttle inputs have on your approach. But that's not the only uniqueness. I mean, Aiko was underselling his and Daniel's work there a little bit on the flight model. For example, one thing is that you have lateral stick steering when you land on a runway, and with full stick off, you get what, Aiko?
Yeah, so when you're on a landing rollout, if you land at a field, you can use differential stabs to turn the aircraft in the direction of the stick
until you get to a certain lower speed.
Yeah, so you can basically maintain center line just by using lateral stick. You don't even have to have your feet on the pedals until you get like to taxi speed.
Nice.
And then you can also, when you're doing that, you also mix the controls with full out stick. So you use you can use both stabs for aero braking. So you don't really need to be on the brakes until you get down below like maybe 80 knots or something.
A lot of guys don't realize how big those stabs are. Those stabs on the Tomcat are actually as big as the wings of an A4.
Yeah, they are huge, and that's right.
Yeah, and if I'm going to throw in my 2 cents about the flight model, it's the flight model is really going to be like one of the major features of aircraft because of how long you guys have put into like with fine tuning it. O'Donnell and my brother Daniel, he's put in a lot of time into the flight model, and it's also one of the things that the SMEs really like about it. So it will be very fun to have people try it, and as the guys have said, the DLC is one of the systems that is really nice once you know how to use it. And other than that, I think that the thing I'm having most problem with actually getting my head around is the fact that you need to control roll with the pedals when you're above a certain AOA, and that's a bit of a mind fuck, but it's really interesting.
So is the roll above? I can't remember what units. It's like 18 units. You can get roll reversal. So if you're at high angle of attack, if you want to do say you want to do a quick roll to the right, put some right pedal in and left stick, and then you'll snap right over.
Yeah.
Is that because you've got adverse yaw affecting the airplane?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dihedral effect. How do you say that correctly in English? Dihedral effect. Yeah. So basically, you get adverse yaw, and that increases, and then it gets you a roll reversal from that, which is also why you shouldn't use at certain AOA roll inputs at all, but rather instead, like Johan said. But even all that actually doesn't do the flight model justice. I mean, there are so many things like we probably keep forgetting here, like wing vortices and the roll effect. Like imagine you're water skiing behind a boat, you can get the wake from the boat, right? And if you drive with the water skis over the boat, how it lifts you over the wake, how it would lift you up and lift you down again. You feel that in the aircraft as well, or if you dip the wing into the vortice, how the vortice pushes down on the wing and then lifts it back out again on the other side. That is modeled. You have jet wash. You have cockpit rattle and buffeting of the wings, and the general feedback that that aircraft gives you is absolutely unique. And I'm not saying that, I mean, of course, I'm extremely biased and in love with it.
As you should be.
But just to get a little bit going on that, yeah, so that we don't put that under the carpet, right? I mean, from a simmer's perspective, I have never ever flown anything like this in any kind of sim. And the great thing is that when you fly with an F-14 pilot, which I had the honor to do, when you fly with real world pilots who have a huge amount of experience from warbirds from World War II to modern jets and whatnot, all of them agree, you know, that that nothing comes as close to flying a real thing than that. And the great thing is that it isn't fly by wire, that it's a pilot's aircraft. You know, the nose constantly wants to go up because of the huge wings, so you have to trim it correctly, but you cannot fly it by trim. You cannot take your mind off the flight. You have to stay on the stick. All of these things, and how she translates into that cockpit rattle, into the buffeting, into the sounds that come along with it, is just amazing, you know. And on the other hand, it lets you do whatever you want. If you want to break it, it's going to let you break it easily, you know. So you have to really be ahead of the aircraft when you fly, and that makes flying itself just extremely rewarding and just such a great experience.
Yeah, that's one of the things about simulators, is that anyone who's flown for real, flying is 80% feel, right? And right, and I owned an airplane for 10 years, and just flying the same airplane, I didn't even have to look. I could tell exactly how fast I was going. I could tell exactly what my RPMs were just from the feel of the wind. When you turn the stick, you can actually feel the aileron start to bite into the wind before the plane even starts to move. It's that much of a feel thing, flying for real. And so simulation, it kind of does a 180 on that, right? It's like now you're forced to be 80% visual, and only 20% feel, or not, I guess 0% feel. But so yeah, so having that kind of that shaking visual and the audio and whatnot, as far as simming, it would be really huge, because that's one of the things you don't get in a sim, is the sounds and the feel.
Yeah, I wish everybody had a force feedback stick and a seat shaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. How's the buffeting
IronMike
behind?
is currently implementing the sim shaker and the butt kicker, so you know that's going to be a great way to even increase that experience, because it's going to give you that tactile feedback. And another thing that aids into that is, of course, that the Tomcat has also been developed with VR in mind. And in my opinion, you know, that the cockpit, how it is done, uh, translates in VR even better than the stuff that we know. And if you combine all these three things, if you can have a sim shaker, seat, the butt kicker, a VR, and that flight model that has been done for the Tomcat, it's going to be a pretty mind-blowing experience for a lot of people.
It also has a ton of power. It can accelerate.
Yes.
I saw, I guess, that MiG 29 yesterday, and that they like just go into the moon with it, and that MiG 29 just nope, not.
Yep.
So
And
I
I
have
think well, just quick addition there is for a flight model. One of my high points were when me and Swiver, my brother, who did a flight model, when we went over to the States to let one of SMEs actually drive aircraft, and and he nailed the carrier landings each and every time. And at that point, we could not, for the life of us ourselves, do that. So it was really fun to see a real pilot that consistently just stick free wires.
wow. So I have a quick question about the flight handling while we're at it, the characteristics. How, the Tomcat was kind of advertised as the first real kind of fighter that could do high angle of attack and slow speed handling and all that. How good is the Tomcat at slow speed and high angle of attack stuff when you get into those situations?
It's way more stable than any of the aircraft that I worked on when I was doing flight training simulators. But all the aircraft I worked on were like on the large end of general aviation, and then like C-130s and stuff like that.
You basically can fly it at an AOA of 30 and fly level if you dance with a rudder a lot to keep
Yeah,
it
you
stable.
kind of have to you kind of have to be active with the pedals, but you can keep it wings level pretty easily at high angle of attack.
Kind of anticipating the flight model of the Tomcat. So I know Homer and 4 other guys just bought brand new rudder pedals. I just got through lubricating mine in anticipation.
We haven't had to touch the rudders in like a year now.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
this thing,
one
you have
of
feet on the pedals the whole time.
yeah, and one of our SMEs who know guys who like train older aviation like Navy pilots to fly general aviation. He actually told us that he could spot the Hornet drivers from the Tomcat drivers really easily by how much we use the pedal.
Feet on the floor. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Hornet pilots didn't even touch the pedals.
Wow.
It's funny.
That's gonna take some getting used to, that's for sure.
All right.
That's
Iceman.
a lot of things in the Tomcat. I think will make a lot of people in the sim community relearn a lot of stuff, because many of the aircraft that we have in sims and many of the systems that are presented to us in various forms and whatnot, without pointing fingers, there's absolutely nothing bad about it, but they have been in a certain way for, I think, over a decade, 2 decades, maybe even now. Like the radar that's present in FC3, the radar in the Tomcat is a true raycasting radar, which is modeled very realistically to what it was in real life. So it will have its powers, but it will also have its limits. The same is with the RWR. The RWR, you guys will know that better than us who worked on these things. Antennas are mounted on the stabs, on the stabilizers. So if you make inputs with your input commands, your RWR picture basically rolls with that. If you
Yeah,
if
because
you
of those
roll your
antennas.
aircraft, it will roll, and sometimes the RWR will not know whether there's 1, 2, or 3 or 4 contacts even at that point. So you might have one F4 on your 3 o'clock. You roll maneuver at the same time, and you will see one F4 on your 12, one on your 3, one on your 4, and one on your 6 o'clock. So in that sense, you will also need some kind of extra thinking in order to keep that situational awareness up and to fly tactically and cleverly, also in tune with your sensors and your instruments. And I think that's even a nicer challenge, because at the beginning, yes, it will be difficult to adapt to that, and it takes a while to get accustomed to, like, for example, the HUD with the update rate, or the limited data that it displays, so that you relearn looking back at the analog instruments that you have, and so on. So these things kind of will redefine a little bit how certain people fly, or how you have to fly with it in order to get really the full potential out of it.
Hmm. Luckily, it's a crew airplane. That's going to be interesting because I think that's one of the. Wow, this is very unique. It's the first crew airplane we pretty much have in DCS, is it not?
Gazelle, but it's nothing like, I don't think nothing like this though.
Yeah.
The L-39 has it as well, but I mean the L-39's backseat is just essentially a second pilot for an instructor. So
Well, I mean, crew airplane. I mean, like those other guys are not actually talking to you the way this Jester.
Yeah, and that was kind of the question I was going to ask. Is that with the F-14, it really is the first plane where 2 crew working together really are integral to making the whole package, sort of work. So what what kind of feedback have you gotten from the testers and your early users about sort of the best way to utilize, Jester and whatnot? It gets pretty busy after the merge and whatnot. So, what kind of feedback have you gotten about what they find is the best way to sort of make the Jester interface work?
How do you mean, other than we did it, or?
Yeah, like is it voice commands? I've heard that you can stare at the menu and maybe hit a button, maybe your
How to
HOTAS.
interact with it in general. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's actually very easy. You have one main button that you can map to bring it up, right? And then you can choose 3 ways basically in order to make the inputs. The first way would be via keyboard commands, which you have always one. Yeah, it's an 8 command rows, so each of the commands has a number going from 1 to 8, And left control plus that number would give you then the next submenu, or in final commands structure, then the actual command in that submenu. The other way would be to map all of that to a head switch, which basically just by pressing the head switch into the direction of that number, 3, 6, or clock position, then would open that command. And the last, and in my opinion, the easiest way is simply by head view. So with VR or with Track IR, you can look at the command and it will open that submenu or execute the command that you've been looking at. And then finally, the last way, and that's going to be up to the user. We want to make all the commands bindable so that in the end you will be able to use third-party programs as voice attack with it as well.
Right.
I think in a long-term perspective, it will be most worth to invest in voice attack, in the sense that you're supposed to talk with your Rio, and going through menus or or even using up a lot of keys for specific command by is kind of the less optimum way. The optimum way is to tell your Rio, lock that guy, and he locks that guy. To simplify them, right? So voice attack for sure will be a nice way to use Jester.
Yeah, to me, plan A would be kind of voice attack. Plan B would just be mapping an enter button to the HOTAS and just looking at the menu and hitting it on your HOTAS, the enter button, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, that's how I have it mapped.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Yeah, Mike, I think your video is the only one that I've seen. Well, I haven't seen any other that was in VR. You were in VR in that one. My question about the gesture make, does it follow your head, or does it stay stationary? So you bring it up, and if you look around, does it stay in front of you, or does it follow your head around as long as you got it activated?
You mean as a human Rio, or as the pilot, how you see Jester?
As the pilot, as you see the menu.
So when you play in VR and open the menu and you have head view as the input option selected, then basically it follows your head view, and your head in-game moves as well in coordinates with in correlation to how you move your head in VR as well as in Track IR. The same counts
So
for
your head
Jester.
itself, like the Jester menu itself, stays stationary though.
Yeah. So
it stays wherever you were looking when you triggered the button, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a
Kinda
small
like the menu.
icon from the center that shows you where you're looking at. So that helps you with that you don't get lost over the menu. So basically, you have a pointer line that helps you guide your.
Okay.
Kind of like the menu in the hangar. Whenever you first the VR hangar, it kind of just stays there, and then you look around.
Yeah, like I think wherever you were looking when you hit the gesture button, it stays in that position.
Okay, cool.
So it's not like blocking you the center of your vision as you look around.
I got a follow-up question too on Jester while we're talking about Jester. Will Jester eventually give like the pilot information when landing on a carrier, like in real life? Is that something been talked about or not?
What kind of information did it give him in real life?
Like just call out
altitude and speed. Sometimes, yeah, depending on takes a lot of altitude information and speed information whenever they're coming in for the carrier. So that way
I think they want to do that, but it probably I don't know if it'll be in early access, but
yeah, I didn't figure it'd be in early access, but I just didn't know if that was something you guys had to consider doing. If you, I don't know if you ever watched Speed and Angels, but if you watch that, you can see the information that she's given there. She's given them as well. So
yeah, he's already doing that when you're refueling, for example. He tells you nice job if you put it in. But he also reads you out the fuel loads, for example. There's some couple stuff he's already implemented. I mean, he makes remarks on your landings, which is more of I would say, an immersion feature than a flight procedure feature. He tells you what wire you trap, or he might, kind of be encouraging to you when you made a bolter or mock you.
I personally,
but these flight procedures around carrier ops, we didn't implement them yet in that sense. We're really trying to get in the basics first.
I personally am really looking forward to flying as the Rio, and I think a lot of guys are going to find that when they do it, it really is going to be a lot of fun, especially in an air wing like ours. You know, we're kind of mill simmers, and mission management and whatnot is kind of a big deal. And so I think that flying once guys start flying as a Rio, they're really going to just kind of fall in love with playing the role of the Rio. And the Rio pilot interaction is a whole almost career field of study in itself with the Rio. Dylan back there is almost like an in-plane sort of AWACS for that crew. So I think once a lot of guys get into being the Rio, they're really going to enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
directing
mean,
an intercept will be really fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
the Rio really is kind of the boss of the whole thing, you know, unless it goes to dogfighting or pulling the trigger
Yeah,
or
the Rio really
landing.
is in charge up to the merge. The pilot is kind of following the Rio's directions, and then the merge he just kind of holds on for dear life and is a second pair of eyes. But up to the merge, the Rio is really running the show.
Exactly, and yeah, I've maybe flown twice, you know. The one who can really talk a lot about Rio is Johan here, but the few times I tried it, you know, it's always been like an amazing experience. And it's not you're not. I mean, there certainly will be periods where the Rio will just sit around a little bit.
Right.
You know, Johan can tell you that, you know, when I fucked around at the tanker in the live stream, and he was just sitting back there and probably googling something or reading something. You know?
Watching a video.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
Watching YouTube.
So we had a shotgun. You have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. Spiceman nailed it on the head. Like me, I'm very interested in seeing what that back seat is like. The question I have is, let's say in the merge, you know, we are used to, let's say, driving a car. When you're in control, you anticipate the inputs, you know what's coming. Did you find it hard to adapt with sitting in front of a screen and watching things happen and watching, you know, with track IR maybe trying to get oriented with what the pilot was going to do? And did that create any major adjustments for you? I don't know if you know what I mean. Kind of like sitting in the passenger seat of a car, you seem to be more sensitive to what the car is doing because you're not in control.
It's actually something I do a lot with the testers, or more often, I would say, not a lot, but more often. When I show them turn fighting and stuff like that a little bit, then I sit in the back and kind of try to do the spotting, and it's not a lot of adjusting. It's just that sometimes, you know, the pilot is one move ahead of you, and then you just have to quickly reset your mind and flip the view, or you know, he rolls when you were looking left, and then you have to look quickly right and stuff like that. But it's actually really good fun, and you really feel I mean, it works together really well, you know, calling out the bandit, and you can stay padlocked on the bandit without caring how that aircraft is flown. If you have a guy in the front who you trust and who's a good stick in general, you know, it's good fun to be that pair of eyes, and stay padlocked on the guy, and call out where he is and aid the pilot in that. But in general, the rear shouldn't, and I suggest you don't, you know, don't comment on the flying in that sense, you know. He's above us, or pull into him, or he's on the lift vector is different than you're pulling too much G, or fly slower, fly faster, you know, that's not up to the rear.
All right.
Correct.
It's all about geometry.
What I find as having been in the backseat quite a lot is that the only time I really want to hit the pilot overhead is when he starts doing stuff with the radar quick lock modes and fucking up my radar stuff.
Stay out of my house.
Yeah, it's not fun to be in the middle of doing something with the radar. The pilot presses the PLM button or the vertical acquisition.
Yeah, nice.
So talking about backseat systems, like I know you guys are obviously, and you guys are getting blown up on the forums about it. Is mainly the systems done and just waiting for texturing? Was that what everyone's holding up on, or what? Curious.
It's basically connecting both together that just takes a bit of time, and polishing up on it, and because it's done all in the same, light of, I would say, perfectionism maybe, to get it just right. So it just takes a little bit of time there.
Yeah, I would say
but we're almost.
the software and the art are both at the same level of completedness. It's just integrating them right now.
Okay, cool.
It's taking a little bit of time. I mean, there's a ton of switches back there.
Oh, I know.
And the panels seem to be randomly arranged. So
There
look at
is
one picture and then look at another picture and like, oh, where should this panel actually be? Stuff like that. That's what's going on right now.
the best way. Like I said, even when I was like, we would like every 110 days or something like that. I was like, 112 day inspection or whatever it was. Yeah, we would pull out the panels and you'd have to, and they would be put back in, and they would always be in a different area than you took it out in. So it was A-TOPS is probably the best way to actually see the actual position for it. That's what we would use if we had any questions. But I mean, most of the guys, like, that's how I would tell my guys to do anyways.
Yeah, Hawkeye now and Spiceman, because you guys didn't know how to put back in the panels, it's taking longer to read.
Yeah.
Now we have to take account for that in the dynamic cockpit system.
Yeah, that's one fun thing that will be fun when everyone realizes that the aircraft we used as a reference doesn't have the panels in the entirely NATO's positions. So I think a lot of people will get a little bit of a mindfuck when they realize that the panels doesn't exactly correspond to the NATO's.
Oh, it never did. Like I said, and I said every aircraft I've ever been in something was off on something. There was.
And it was such a mishmash of avionics out there. There was no clean A and then B, because they would come out and do various upgrades at various times, and Grumman would have field crews come out and, okay, maybe this crew is coming out to do, the radios. This crew is coming out to do the RWR. And VF41, they came out and they upgraded the system for the Lantern, and it was still an F-14A. So there's F-14As out there with the Lantern. So it really is just a mishmash of avionics out there.
Yeah, that's exactly what we found as well. And I think the biggest mindfuck for myself is when I found a picture of an F-14D with a fishbowl TID. That kind of blew my mind a little bit.
We had the fish bowls because if they had no TIDs and no PTIDs, then it would put a TID in there just because they needed a radar. So
because the Lantern, they had that bus adapter, that hand controller was a bus adapter in there, and I don't think that you needed to have that digital TID in order to get the Lantern picture on it if you had that bus controller.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that actually. It's because of us not doing the PTID at first, we've gone like the fishbowl TID and the Lantern, and we realized that it might be like a kind of odd one out there, and that it might just be like the really early trials that had it like that, but it works fine, and it's not unrealistic as far as we know, even though most Lantern-equipped aircraft use the PTID.
No, I'm loving that because that's what that was the configuration VF41 was in, and I was VF41 goes, oh no, I'm loving that.
Yeah, and like the final deciding factor is that would we want to leave out the Lantern just because we had a TID and wait until we had a PTID? And the answer is of course no. And and as far as we found, like you said, it isn't an unrealistic configuration.
Not at all.
So I've got a question, kind of changing up gears. I have a Phoenix question actually. So did you guys build your AIM-54 from the ground up, or is it kind of a kit bash between you guys doing? I mean, I know you guys did the flight dynamics, but did you guys build your own guidance system, or did you build the Phoenix from the ground up, or did you use what's already in the game?
We only have a certain amount of access to anything weapons when it comes to DCS stuff. It's certain things that ED does and certain things that we can access and basically build from the ground up, and then certain things like, for example, guidance, which you mentioned, we cannot influence. Would love to, but we have to wait, presumably till ED is done with doing the stuff for certain iterations of whatever they're doing with it, and then see how much access we get on that. So in that sense, we have to work together with them. Johan can maybe iterate a bit more on the parts that we did for the Phoenix.
Yeah, and like you guys have said, it's we have a totally custom parameter setup for the AIM-54 Phoenix, but we don't have as much control of a flight model as we do over the aircraft, but we feel it's close enough and it's quite good. Like IronMike says, it's more about like the seeker and the control of the missile itself, and at first it's going to be a little bit similar to how the current active missiles work, but we're working with ED and trying to find out if we could actually have like a little bit more control over how the seeker and how the guidance works, as the AIM-54 has some a little bit like quite a few like quirks and which are both good and bad for a missile compared to other active missiles.
Awesome.
And as soon as ED lets us like control the seeker mode and stuff like that, and we make it work, we'll put it in. But expect the AIM-54 seeker to work much like the AMRAAM does currently at early access.
So we've been asking you guys questions for about an hour and a half now. Did you guys have any questions for our three Tomcat experts here?
Well, from my point of view, I just I kind of just want to say that we would like eventually like to receive feedback from you guys when you've tried it out, and if we have like questions we can't like find our answers to ourselves, we would like to ask you guys if that's possible. But and like I said earlier, if you guys find quirks and small stuff and even major stuff that doesn't work entirely correctly, just feel free to tell us, and we'll do our best to implement it.
Yeah. So just to piggyback on that, so what is the makeup of the SME team? You know that you've got. How many of them are there? Pilots, Rios? Do you have sort of systems guys on the SME team? So what does your kind of SME network look like?
Our biggest, or probably our SME with the most contribution is a guy named Jay that was part of VF-84. He's a pilot. He has about 1,500 hours in F-14As, and he's probably spent as many hours as I've spent coding, flying our test builds. So he's probably put like several hundred hours into just flying and then writing us like 3-page emails about what he thinks about it.
Cool.
So he thinks that the heart of the envelope of the flight model is like dead on, and just recently said that he thinks that all the high alpha stuff is good now too. So we're feeling pretty good about that. And he's mainly just been working as the flight model SME. He hasn't really been testing a whole lot of systems, and he doesn't have experience with the GE motors. So we're gonna have to wait to have him give better input on the TF-30s.
Do you have a Rio SME?
We have several Rio SMEs.
Cool.
I'd say we have about like 3 to 4 pilots and like 3 or 2 active Rio.
4, yeah, 3, 4, 3, yeah, 3 Rio.
Cool.
One thing that was a bit of contention between Jay and the pilot SMEs and other like general aviation guys and even other fighter guys is that the fact that like the ability to enter into a spin with F-14 isn't nearly as great as like common knowledge would put it. It's actually quite hard to enter a flat spin with F-14. And that said, it's still really, really dangerous if you eventually get into one. But it isn't just a case of just asymmetric thrust. You basically kind of have to like combine full rudder and lateral stick with asymmetric thrust to enter into a flat spin.
Yeah.
But it is really dangerous when you eventually enter it.
Oh yeah, according to the NATOPS, as soon as you start feeling that eyeball out G, you eject.
Yep. But yeah, Jay's the main flight model guy. We have another guy named Kurt that mainly has experience in the D model with the DFCS. So we may tap him if we ever do that. But Jay's got the most experience with the AFCS, and he has a lot of time that he's been able to donate to us, basically.
I was there when they
all that's pretty much right on.
I was there when they incorporated DFCS onto the, because Deltas didn't have it either initially. We didn't get AFCS or DFCS till '99, I think, when we finally started implementing. And I think the Deltas were the first ones to get it, but like that, but eventually all the other platforms that were still going, the Alphas and Bravos that were still flying, they got it eventually as well by 2002.
Yep.
Do you have the yaw? Do you have the yaw string model? Just curious.
We're gonna put one on there. We haven't done it yet, but we will.
Awesome.
Jace recently said in an email that it flies better than the training sims they used in Oceania.
I actually flown in those training sims in Oceania when I was a turn call instructor. So we had to do simulator time before we actually got to do that in the actual aircraft, and it was cool. It was like, but it had a lot more. Actually the plane actually moved around. You actually had the force feedback of the stick, and the motion platform and all. And it was a big dome type looking area, whatever. So it was definitely a pretty cool experience. And like what you got, the graphics wise, nothing on what you guys do.
Yeah. So he thinks that it flies better than the training sims in Oceania, which I guess is a good sign.
Right.
I suspect the coefficient data that we got for this probably came from those simulators, and then we just kind of added more stuff on top of it.
Cool. When it came to the data link, and how much I came from I worked on Deltas and we had JTID, so I don't know much about the Link 4. What information will you be getting from the data link, and where will you get the information from?
It depends on like the mode of the link you're in, and when you're using it in the TDS mode, which is the Hawkeye or the surface control data link, you can receive up to 8 targets, and you also send back data to the controller about the aircraft, what you're carrying, and fuel load, and so on. And in this, at the moment, we're implementing the we're implementing like the basic targeting stuff, and try and have an algorithm for what 8 most prioritized targets they'll send up to you. And we're also implementing like a way to do a data link nav fix to help you update the INS. And like a lot of the systems in the data link are really hard to do with DCS because it kind of relies on you having a controller doing stuff. But in real life, you could kind of like hand over control of aircraft to the controller if you're in autopilot, and have him guide you in for air-to-ground stuff and even air-to-air stuff. But one part that does work in the Link 4 is the automatic carrier landing system. That does work.
Sweet.
So you basically just intercept the glide stop and hook up, and then the aircraft will land itself.
How about the fighter-to-fighter stuff? Does any of that going to be in there? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's in as well, and one of the quirks is that you have to decide if you want to use the surface or the fighter link, because they're mutually exclusive. So you're either in the surface control mode or you're in the fighter link. And in the fighter link, it's up to 4 Tomcats, and we've set it up so it's easy to use within a flight. And you basically receive I don't remember how many targets, but you receive a couple of targets from each aircraft. And their location as well, and there's a navigational fix system where you can kind of like assume the other aircraft's navigational fix to help you like sync up your targets, so you don't have that whole differing picture stuff that IronMike talked earlier about, where the targets are not in the same positions.
Yeah, if he's right next to you, you can do a fighter-to-fighter data link, and even if he's not, you can lock him up and do a fighter-to-fighter data link nav update.
Yeah, exactly, and that's in.
Yeah, I know that from back in the day, when I was in 41, we went to Red Flag, and one of the tactics that they said that they used to use was that they'd have a section of Tomcats kind of down in the weeds in the valleys there with their radar on standby, and then they'd have a section kind of out and up acting as decoys with their radar, and they would use them kind of like an AWACS. They would use their radars against the incoming package, and then when that package passed, and relay the targets via data link to the guys down in the weeds, and then when the package passed overhead, the guys down in the weeds would pop up, radars on, and get them from behind. So I think that fighter-to-fighter data link was a pretty common tactic that the Tomcats would use. But
yeah, and it's perfectly doable in DCS as well.
Yeah. Cool.
With the difference that DCS weeds is infested with red mix and SU-27s.
Right.
So I believe Shotgun had another ordnance question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shadow. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just a follow up to the link for it. Just from the AWACS days, I used to set up the link for it. And if I recall correctly, I think it was at least from the E3. I think the E2 had a little bit more fidelity and flexibility with link for it. As you say, like they were able to induce a few controller inputs. But I think from the E3, it was, from what I remember, it was just one way, and the link 4 antenna was located in the radome on the E3, and I think it was just one way, but it was a 1300-watt antenna, and so it would just burn the information into like an F14 at long distance, but they couldn't communicate back to the E3.
Your controller guys got many kids.
Yeah.
They all have prostate cancer, right? Yeah.
No,
That's
but
actually a saying in the Swedish Navy that us weapons engineering guys who works with radars and stuff, we only get girls. And then the funny thing is, it's actually
yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
it is a thing that was folklore. A lot of the ABM Air Battle Manager guys who, especially in the back of the airplane, all had girls. So
And I say the same thing about nukes on the boat.
Yeah. Just a final thing about the link is that like you have this whole I think it's like 20 caution lights or like indicator lights in the back seat.
The
which
DDI,
are, yeah, exactly, which are driven by the data link, and currently we can't really use a lot of those as it's input from a controller. It would be very cool to eventually like connect to like a lot ATC like program and actually enable a controller, but it's a bit in the future, unfortunately. But it would be very cool to have an actual link for controller.
Yeah, they were like little text messages basically that would pop up.
Yeah.
Yep.
The messages between fighter aircraft, I think, are possible though, but they're very limited. They're like cannot comply and stuff.
Yeah.
They were canned messages, if I recall, right?
Yeah, they were canned. They would just light up. They would light up lights in the cockpit on the DDI, the digital data indicator. So they were just canned. Yeah, you couldn't. It wasn't like free form text.
You mean I can't use my Twitter in the back of the Tomcat?
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah. No.
Yes. Obviously, your three primary air-to-air weapons, Sidewinder, Sparrow, Phoenix, are going to be the priority from that standpoint, and then the general purpose bomb, GBUs, probably clusters and stuff like that. My question is, there were some, I guess you could call them accessory weapons that down the line came from the Tomcat, and I was kind of wondering where the vision was with that, such as maybe like Bluetooth parachute flares to assist with any kind of FAC-A work we wanted to do with close air support with our groups, or LGTRs for practice, laser guided training rounds. Is that kind of stuff? I'm sure it's probably lower on the list, but is that kind of stuff on the list? I guess I should say.
I would say that for the laser guided training run specifically, we'd probably wait for ED to do it, but the ones that are actually in, we're kind of already have implemented. So we do have parachute flares, and those are possible to use already, and we have done tests with the TALD as well, which we are implementing for the Hornet. So those will be there, and it's also been like a bit of a hot issue about what air-to-ground weapons to actually allow, and from what we found, the early air-to-ground stuff that Navy never used, we found like stuff actually saying that all those munitions were actually tested and cleared, but then decided not to be used. So we do allow for like the excessive bomb loads and the rocket stuff and as well, and it's mostly a case of why not.
Did you ever strap on 18 Mac 82's shotgun?
No, sir.
He was actually talking about that.
Yes, no,
Yeah. Yeah, the max we had ever put on was 4, and we called it a super bomber, and the A-6 guys would give us a ton of shit about that, but yeah, it was mostly just 4 bombs on the belly on stations 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, and we know that was kind of the case, but seeing as the aircraft was actually fitted for and tested with all like the older crazy loadouts, our thinking kind of is that if there were actually like a real conflict where you kind of had to use the F-14 as a bomb bomb truck. There's no reason why the Navy couldn't have just said that we'll do it. And I mean, not much else in DCS is actually that 100% true to real life anyway. So it's kind of in there as a like what if bomb load and rocket load, because the real aircraft could have done it as far as we know.
I've never seen a real aircraft carry 6 Phoenix either. Our typical loadouts were
Right.
4
I've
and
seen
4,
four.
4 nines and 4 sparrows, and 2, 2 and 2, 2 winders,
Yeah.
2 sparrows, and 2. Those are our most common loadouts. I don't know of any squadron on the East Coast that even had Phoenix wing stations on there. It would be I know it would have been a disaster for us to try and get those up. The cooling all lines running out there had to be all flushed out, and it was just we just never even tried to carry
Yeah,
Phoenix on our
and
wings.
that's kind of my point as well. As I mean, did the aircraft ever carry 18 Mark IIs, like apart from like initial
Right.
testing? No,
Probably not.
but the aircraft itself was actually set up, and at least the early A's could use the armament panel to deliver that kind of loadout. So and we have gotten some feedback from one of the reviews that like a certain number of the B aircraft never had the armament panel all wired up. So when they eventually switched to the bomb stuff, they had to like
Oh, I
call
can
Grumman.
imagine from a maintenance perspective when they started dropping bombs of how much more maintenance that was, because that stuff had never been used.
Yeah, and the Rio SMEs actually said that they had to call back like Grumman guys to actually wire up the panel, which were never used and wasn't actually wired up in factory. But as far as we know, the at least the early A's and like when they eventually added the bombcat stuff in, all aircraft were actually capable of carrying bombs on the close
Sure.
islands and all the rockets also, and all the ballistics calculations and stuff were in the data system. So no, you know.
Yeah, that's
It's
just
there
like
for you to try out, and if you don't like it, don't use it.
correct. Yeah, it's
The
just like
thing is,
the
of course, sorry. The thing is, of course, the difference. You know, when we fly in a sim, we go out there to cause mayhem in some way, right? When we take such an aircraft, and we will spawn in 20 bears and 16 mixes, stuff like that. That of course are completely unrealistic in real life. Plus, then there's the difference when you fly as a squadron. In multiplayer, you also you can be more realistic in that sense as well, because you have multi ships who share weapons among each other. So if a 4-ship of F-14s would go up there, each one carrying 2 Phoenixes, that would be still a spread of 8 Phoenixes among them. And if you then meet one bear, that's more than enough, I would say. So I don't know what a real life scenario could have been that you would have gone through that strapping 6 Phoenixes on. Another thing is also when you're completely out of fuel, so zero fuel, and you carry 4 Phoenixes, and you're actually still overweight for carrier landings. So.
Yeah, back in my day, the ROE would never have them, shooting a Phoenix at 100 miles. They actually much more valued the Phoenix for its launch and leave at 12 miles than they did for being able to shoot somebody down at 100 miles. So,
the Phoenix is really dangerous close in. People don't realize.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also like to add in regards to weapon loadouts. It's that in this case, it's with a bomb and rockets. It's a loadout that wasn't used, but it was realistic. But in the case to like people talking about harms and AMRAAMs, that's a no, because a normal standard F-14 wouldn't be able to use an AMRAAM or a harm, unlike the bombs and rockets. And just because they tried out harms and AMRAAMs doesn't mean that the aircraft could actually use them.
No.
Correct.
And that's also the thing about the Iranian Tomcats, and a lot of people like want the Hawk and the Alamo loadouts, and we have really little info on that. And when we eventually do that, that will be behind a server enforceables option. Because as far as we found, while the Iranians were able to like physically load up an Alamo or a Hawk on the F-14, there's absolutely no evidence that they were actually able to launch them and actually have them.
I also talked to Kurt because one of our testers, friend of mine as well, he's like very how would I say, he's allergic to seeing unrealistic stuff in the sim, right? So,
that's all we are.
So
We're
if you
simmers.
take off,
Yeah.
a classic, right? So if you take off it for every time you make a comment, they didn't take off it for Phoenix's IronMike,
Right.
And I asked one of our SMEs with whom I've flown a bit, had the honor to do that. I'd ask him, would you ever take off with 4 or 6? And he said, like, well, that sure wasn't something that would happen in that sense, but it could have been the pilot's decision and it would have been possible. And the pilot may even have had to do that decision also based on what kind of wind was, how heavy he would want it to take off and so on. So,
Right.
it's in general, it was possible. So,
because you have to
we'd be able
land
to
too.
do it.
And sometimes you'd
Yeah.
rather have the gas and not the missiles.
And for us, it makes also sense in a sim because you're gonna shoot them off, right? I mean,
Right.
luckily, most of the pilots who took off never had to do that, and I mean, I think also in real life, the F-14 was much more used as a deterrent by just its sheer presence. It kept the fleet safe in
Right.
some aspect. It wasn't the goal was not to shoot down as many people as you could, but to keep them away from even getting into that situation. And
Yeah.
in the sim, of course, you want to, get everybody into the situation so we kill each other without mercy, But that's the point, and that's the difference. So obviously, you
Yeah.
will take more missiles, you will shoot them off, and you will come back without them, and so on.
Yeah, those kind of
That's
loadouts
actually
I call World War III loadouts.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you guys are much more into the US Navy than the Iranians, but there's actually like quite a few like interesting tidbits of information from the Iran-Iraq war in that as far as we found out, there was actually like this one case where they like overrode the AUG-9 ground switch to actually like light up Iraqi aircraft from the tarmac when they didn't have time to get in the air and scare them off just from seeing the F-14 on the radar warning system.
I guess I came from a TARP squadron, so I know you guys aren't doing TARPs for your early access, but how do you plan on implementing TARPs when you do? And what will you be able to download images captured, and will all the cameras be utilized in TARPs, or do you have an idea?
Well, from a little like I've talked to like the other guys about it, it's the way we see it is that we're gonna want to do it to be correct in the aircraft, and then kind of like if you guys have flown the Vigan generates like kneeboard like RVR mission reports when you land, and as far as from what we found, it will be possible to do some sort of camera system where you actually generate real pictures in the screenshot folder or some folder for F-14, so you can actually have maybe not like the full amount of images like in the real TARPs, but some sort of actual photos from a mission.
Like a button you press, hey, take a picture of this, whatever.
Yeah, so that's our goal, and at the moment it seems feasible, but we will know for sure when we get into the TARP stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in some sort of TARPS implementation where you can have actual pictures on your home.
That would be awesome.
Maybe even with some kind of tactical, so that it doesn't look like just like a screenshot, but like a
like a filter, like a yeah.
Yeah, the blue natives
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the blue natives actually does detail like the camera angles for the TARPs and stuff, so it shouldn't be too hard.
That'd be awesome. Coming from a realism standpoint, we don't do any kind of, here in CVW-11, we don't do any type of mission, a wing-wide mission anyway, without actually somebody either going out and flying a recce and taking screenshots from just out the window, or something like that. So having an actual pod to do that would be just amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, those things. I mean, in the end, it's a camera, right? And then, for what do you use a camera? And it's really cool then when you have missions where this kind of data that you can collect with the TARPs is again mission crucial for the next phase or step of that mission, so that other guys then can come in and basically utilize the information that you gathered for them in order to carry out their mission as a consequence of it. If you sack it like that, but that's again, that's dependent of the mission builder and how guys want to use it. So I think the TARPs can be a really cool asset for that. I already started building a little mission, fantasies like some kind of high value target leaves a known position and would guide you to a hideout that you've been looking for, or guys on the ground been looking for a while, and you follow him with TARPS, take pictures from that area, and then the next step will be decided upon that, and so on. Just fantasizing here into the blue, but if you use TARPS for stuff like that, it's cool. And we did that with the Vegan as well online, and the Vegan also has the speciality that you have ELINT functions, which means that the stuff that is recorded from the RWR again can be used in order to spot SAM positions, and so you get mission crucial data out of it. And in a big multiplayer scenario, that can be really cool.
Absolutely.
That's
so
awesome.
I had one question that actually slipped my list. So for the ordnance kind of thing on it, have you guys given any thought to the TDU-33, the tow banner for air-to-air gunnery?
Yeah, I know of the banner. It's we haven't really looked at it yet, and I think it's going to be one of those things that's really dependent on how feasible it is to do in DCS. And my guess would be that we'd have to poke ED for actual engine changes to allow for towing a banner like that.
Okay.
So if it's feasible down the line, absolutely, but it might not be possible in DCS.
Awesome. Cool. And the last question I have is, to what level of does like Jester help you with the checklist? Because being in a milsim kind of organization, right, we're all about checklists. We have many pages of checklists. Does Jester help you out with that?
Well, we don't do the full extent of all the checks that the pilot in the rear would do in real life, right? I mean, because it's probably a little bit overboard for a sim environment, but what you do have with Jester is the assisted start. So he runs the startup checklist through with you, and you have to interact with him on each step. And it's both a nice way to simulate like a crew coordinated startup that you don't just do quietly for yourself, but it's also a great way to learn the startup actually, because he guides you through it both orally and with hints in the cockpit. So that's one of the aspects. Whether or not we're gonna implement checklists, I don't know if Daniel told you more about that, Johan, but before release we wouldn't have planned anything.
I think the eventual goal is to have Jester being able to read out specific checklists. So like IronMike says, the startup is already in, and eventually being able to ask him to read out like emergency checklists will also be in there, but that's a little bit down the line.
Sounds great. Did anybody else have anything?
So just a quick addition there is that the general like way of doing it is that we kind of some checklists we kind of have to shorten down because if it's a simulator, but we do want you to be able to pull out a checklist from the NATOPS and just do everything within the limits, of course. But so even if we have shortened some checklists for DCS, we still want guys like you guys to be able to use the correct NATOPS checklists.
Is OBC enabled? Is OBC modeled?
It's not currently, but and it might not be at the early access, but it will be for sure as soon as. Okay. As I feel it's a big part of being the real.
It really was. I said, yeah, that was like OBC was like, and especially from a ground guy, dude. I mean, that was one of the things, that was always part of our checklist, saying the plane did not fly without going through OBC.
No, you even did an OBC on an Alert 5 launch. It was one of the things you did was OBC. So yeah.
Yeah, but you guys can rest assured that it will be in there, even if it's not at early access.
Just on the whole test thing, one last question for me. Bit sequences. The AUG9 had a plethora of bit sequences that it would run, and some of those were, kind of extraneous. But there's bit, sequences 3 and 4, were really part of your pre-flight checks as an overall systems confidence checks and verifying that your missiles were working right. How much of that have you modeled? I'm sure you have your hands full just getting the main systems to work, but how much of the AUG9 bit have you modeled?
Yeah, it's also like the OBC, so it's kind of like the next bullet points on the checklist after we've done the OBC. With DCS, it's unfortunate we'll end up being like kind of like watching a video with everything just checking off and working. But within reason, we like the OBC, we do want to implement everything on the cap. So eventually, you will be able to do all the bits on the cap.
Cool.
And it's all a matter of like prioritization. So they're on the list and they will be done just as soon as we can get to them.
Cool.
And we do have the info for it. So and now we also have the correct like connections to ask you guys if we have any questions.
Yeah. Actually, the bit sequences are one of the things that you can that at least I was able to find documentation on out there on the internet. So at least that's not exclusive to the yellow and ATOP. So that's good.
And a few points we've actually like have kind of been able to reverse engineer from the bits on what the actual systems did, even if we don't have like the exact manual.
Right. Cool.
I got one last question for you guys. The manual, how's the manual coming along, and when can we actually see your project?
That's my child, and it's it's actually quite close. There are some kind of like critical points we're still waiting for, but the goal is to have it out within the next few.
If you ever need you want some input on it, let us know. I said between me and Spice and Shotgun, I'm sure we've looked at those manuals a million times. So.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the like the real challenge about the manual is really to like if you forgive the expression, to actually dumb down the NATOPS enough to be a simulator manual.
I hear you.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure.
Because the normal Tomcat user in DCS will not be able to use the NATOPS to read out what they want to know.
Bring out the 16-3s.
It's more like a condensed manual.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
With only critical information.
Said within the next few, it kind of got cut off.
Yeah, the goal is to have a manual out within the next few weeks. I'm kind of like waiting for a few critical arts elements and stuff, and so yeah, it's it will be out before release, and hopefully within the next few weeks.
Awesome, thanks.
I'll send my IronMike copy of ours that we've made up so far. We haven't done any of the backseat stuff yet, just because we don't know what it all is going to be implemented in that and how it's all going to play out in DCS. So, but the front seat stuff, most of that stuff should be very similar to what the real life is anyway.
Yeah, and I very much would like feedback on the manual once I put it out there. So when it's out, feel free to hit me up. I like any criticism as long as it's constructive.
Oh, absolutely. I hear you. Same here.
Yeah. What made you choose the Tomcat?
We've all watched Top Gun.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Great.
And Top Gun's what got me interested in flying. Beforehand, I didn't care about airplanes. After Top Gun, I mean, I was an av geek, and it was over. So,
yeah, we're all that generation, kinda, and it's still spanning across. You know, I mean, the movie, from a movie thing, whatever, you know. But I mean, there's few movies who molded an entire generation of enthusiasts of one specific thing so firmly than Top Gun, I think. But it's not only that, you know, I mean, the Tomcat is just one of the most iconic aircraft, and I think, you know, more than Top Gun made the Tomcat made Top Gun, you know.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
It's, you know, it's the real star of the movie. It's the real star of Final Countdown. It's just an aircraft, and I gotta tell you, you know, I mean, after flying this thing for, I think, over 1.5 years now, and other guys probably longer, you know, and flying it really on a daily basis and regularly, and testing and buck hunting and whatnot, you know. But it's just the moment you're close to it, even in a sim, you feel humbled. It's, I don't know, it may sound stupid, right? But it's just this very special feeling you get with this aircraft. And then when you fly with it, and you get all that what we talked about from the flight model, and this feeling being in there, those beautiful graphics and that amount of realism, if you then do that information if you then have somebody who's a real guy in your back, or you are in the back, and you take off from the cat and you look over your shoulder and you see the carrier disappear behind you while somebody else is flying it, and all these things combined is just it doesn't get old. You can do it as often as you want. The Tomcat is something else.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait either.
We're all holding our breath, man. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys showing up and taking time out of your busy schedules and your weekend to come spend it with us. So we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to add that one of the things that really struck me about the Tomcat as a technician is that there's a lot of systems in Tomcat that really impressed me with how capable they actually were for an aircraft this old.
Yeah, that is very true.
Yep.
This is awesome.
Well, thanks, guys. I definitely glad you guys showed up today. It was awesome. I appreciate you coming to spend the weekend with us. That was
Yeah, 2 hours is a big chunk of your weekend, and we really do appreciate you taking the time.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Anytime. Thanks to you guys, and was great to do the interview with you.